we are starting the closing session of today, and I'll be a moderator of this session. My name is Atsuko Miwa, Director of the Asia Pacific Human Rights Information Center and the co-chair of C20.
And I'm Katsuji Mata, Chair of CSO of Japan, and a member of the C20 Steering Committee. Okay, so in this final plenary, first of all, we are going to hear back from the 7 breakout groups in the morning and the afternoon. So if we could just go in this order, 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, 2A, 2B, 2C. Maybe you have a maximum of 3 minutes or less. So please state your name and which session you're representing. And some of the sessions may have one or two key messages on the screen. Some of them may not. So, yeah. Okay. Can we start? Huh? Okay.
Thank you very much. I'm so sorry my voice is not very good today, but I moderated session A1, which was on civic space in Asia. So we first look into the current state of civic space in Asian countries and also around the world, and what are the factors behind them. And of course, situation is very serious. But on the other hand, of course, civil society has been fighting back, and also there is still chances of multi-stakeholder dialogue. And also, of course, it is important that G20 address this issue. There should be consensus on this, and also various actors. They could be country governments, whether they're north or south, or also donor agencies, international organizations, and also businesses who should work on this issue. But on the other hand, of course, it is important on the side of civil society first to avoid separation of civil society organizations from the citizens' movements. And also, I think because there are also chances of multi-stakeholder co-working relationship with other sectors, but the other side of the coin is that there are always risks that civil society become just service delivery instruments of other stakeholders. So we should really be careful about that, and also we should keep being actors in their own right. So that will be a short message of our session. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Takayama-san. So, next session is inclusive democracies, gender, sexuality, and equal participation. And the floor is yours.
Wonderful, thank you, Atsuko. So my colleague Ramani Mishra moderated this session, and where we looked at gender and sexuality as a key pillar to achieving SDG 16. We had a really diverse panel of speakers. We were talking about same-sex marriage in Taiwan, women's political participation in Japan, discriminatory laws and policies in Kenya, trans rights in India, and sexual violence in Japan. So as you can see, a very broad range of issues, all related to SDG 16, as well as gender and sexuality. Despite the fact that they were quite different issues, there was a lot of, universality in terms of how they affect countries across the world. But we also saw one key theme arise, which is there in yellow. So while it's really important to aim for progressive legislation that works towards equality for women and LGBTQI people, that alone won't ever fix the issue. So implementation in this context is key, and we need to work at the community level to change social norms and break down discriminative systems. In real terms, I think it's quite good to use an example. So an example might be legal quotas for women's political participation. That's a really effective way to quite rapidly increase gender parity of course. But it only works if the law is taken up and if it's enforced. That law alone also doesn't address barriers to women's participation in terms of entering into and progressing within politics. It doesn't address discrimination against women in politics, including the disproportionate scrutiny and violence that women face in politics. And it also doesn't address diversity of representation. So while we might see an increase in women, we'll often see an increase in women political participation. What we'll see is an increase in specific types of women within that space. And so it's really important in terms of working at the community level to change social norms and attitudes to try and normalise women participating in politics and encourage diverse groups, including LGBTQI people, women with disabilities, migrant women, and so on, to participate more in public space.
Thank you. Next up is 1C, corruption and democratic governance from Emilia.
So I was not supposed to report back to the plenary, so I will do my best, and if anyone participated of our session and want to jump in and put more information, please feel free to do it. So in our session...
We also have 3 points up on the screen.
Well, so there we have, and I was very happy when you mentioned the lack of implementation, because it's something that came up also in our session, and in fact the G20 Anti-Corruption Working Group is focusing since last year in holding the G20 accountable for their anti-corruption commitments. And then we also have, again, minimum standards in domestic system and whistleblower protection. And let me explain what we did in our session. So we had a whistleblower that came and shared his experience as whistleblower here in Japan, which was really amazing, because this year the G20 Anti-Corruption Working Group has 2 priorities, whistleblower and a corruption-free infrastructure. We also share the main recommendations of the G20 Anti-Corruption Working Group. You all have a copy of the policy pack, so I kindly invite you to read our recommendations, where you will find recommendations about infrastructure, whistleblowing, gender and corruption. That is something that we have been working closely together with the Gender Working Group, and also the G20 effectiveness. There was also raised a question whether we should, or statement whether we should start focusing maybe on enablers such as lawyers and accountants that are, people that often facilitate corruption deals, which we said that if all the C20 really agrees on this, because you know that we as C20 in the policy pack reflects what civil society really believes that we should be addressing. Of course, I will be more than happy to do it. So for all the anti-corruption community, start thinking maybe for the following years about focusing on these topics for the C20, and make sure also that the G20 work on them.
Thank you, Emilia. And thank you all for keeping that strictly. Thank you very much for your efforts. So now we'd like to invite the speaker from the special session on Africa.
Thank you. Afternoon, everyone. Afternoon. Our session was on illicit financial flows, specifically looking in Africa. What we discussed was we discovered that illicit financial flows are particularly a world challenge, but they normally affect Africa more. Because Africa is the continent which has got the resources which are being siphoned to Central European and Asian countries. We also talked of the role of civil society in the ways it needs to keep illicit financial flows. And we also discovered that civil society has got a major role to play, because it is the one that puts our African governments in check, because the same governments, together with multinational companies on one side, are also collaborating with the issue of illicit financial flows. So our 2 key messages were that there is need to have a community-based approach to keep illicit financial flows, because it all starts from the communities where the extraction is taking place. There's also need of civil society to build capacity in communities so that they can safeguard their resources. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now let's go to the afternoon sessions. 2A, financial and security constraints for CSOs. From Renat.
Hello, thank you. Well, I wasn't supposed to be reporting either. I don't have any key messages, but I can summarize what we discussed in the session.
There you go.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so we discussed financial and legal constraints for civil society organizations. So first of all, we discussed the constraints for the operation caused by barriers to access to resources, especially bank de-risking. And then we explored the different kinds of legal restrictions that governments are imposing on the basic freedoms for civil society, freedom of association, expression, and peaceful assembly, and highlighted that there is a worrying trend for states to resort to the rule by law instead of the rule of law. We use the law as a tool against civil society instead as a tool to protect freedoms. And we listened to colleagues providing experiences from different countries, from Korea, from Mongolia, and a regional African perspective. And then, thanks to the participation from the public, we got a few interesting questions that led us to discuss advocacy and how civil society organizations can react to these restrictions and how change can be achieved. So the discussion led to some conclusions regarding different tactics that can be used depending on the context, whether the civic space in that particular country is more open or closed, also the nature of the restrictions, and also the reasons why those restrictions were imposed. So one of the things that one of our colleagues, experts in financial restrictions and bank risking mentioned is that it's different when governments impose restrictions with the purpose of limiting the legitimate work of civil society than when these national legislations are basically inspired or forced by global regulations that force governments to impose bank financial restrictions on civil society. So the strategies need to take all of these into account.
So next, we'd like to invite Julian to report on the session on science, technology, and civil society.
Yeah, the session on technology was beginning with 4 highly informative presentations about the digital economy and the various ideas and concepts of innovation that corporations and governments have in mind and want to propose. We were almost shocked to see how these concepts promote essentially a kind of anarchy. Anarchy meaning innovation without regulation, innovation for innovation's purpose, innovation as a principle in itself. And we discovered that we are in favoring a little bit more conservative approach. We are in favor of innovation, but not too much and not too fast, and first of all, not without regulation. We need to make sure that innovation is regulated so it benefits people and the planet and not only a few corporations. And how that regulation exactly looks like is a matter of further discussion, and the discussion is just beginning.
Thank you. And last but not least, session 2C on SDG 16.2, violence against children.
Thank you. My name is Nana Mito from Free the Children Japan. We got 2 keywords. First is zero tolerance. Violence against children should be zero tolerance, such as sexual violence, physical violence, emotional violence, or neglect or negligent treatment. And in any places like jail, school, at home, any places with zero tolerance. The second keyword is violence, health, education, girls' rights, all issues are related. In order to prohibit violence against children, we should not tackle with and focus on one issue but to tackle with incomprehensive, such as these problems. We got some example, such as like girls who cannot access to sanitary pad, they need to skip a school. So like that's the problem, like health education girls' rights. So everything are related. So we need to focus on all problems. This year is the 30th anniversary of CLC. So let's keep it up and work together. I believe that we can make more better world for children, for everyone, for environment. So let's do it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for everyone for reporting back, and thank you all for participating in the productive and fruitful discussions in the breakout in the morning and the afternoon. If you have any additional comments that you might want to make, could you raise your hand? You have participated in the morning and afternoon, something that really struck you, something that really you want us all to take home with? Is there anything? Yes. And maybe one more.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I'm taking it because something struck me since this morning. It's the interrelationship between all these areas of discussion and the messages that are coming out. From those messages, I can see two levels of solutions: local level and global level. And I think we need to be thinking about how we combine those two levels and get the solutions effective enough and right. Thank you.
Wonderful. And thank you very much for your wonderful intervention and the point that you made. I think that's something that we are going to tackle with in the next 2 days session as well. Now, do I see a second hand from a woman?
Thank you so much. I think what stood out for me for the first time participating in the G20 process is how intersectional all the issues we push for in other policy processes are. So if you look at the centrality of women's rights, even in such discussions, they're still critical, meaningful youth engagement. So for me, it's been refreshing to hear that the challenges that we push for in other spaces are still a priority. They are shaping civic spaces, funding for women's rights, and all of these issues. So it's been a refreshing experience for me, and I look forward to staying engaged. Thank you.
I want to change my voice so that you might excuse me to talk. I think...
and you maybe stand up so that everyone can see you. Yeah.
Okay, right. It doesn't help with my height. I think for me that the two things that stood out was on the STI session. The question is, the discussion that we're having is still how civil society is using technology as a tool for advocacy and development. But yet right now technology is no longer a tool. Technology is actually a platform on which development is being built. And so I'm just wondering whether as a team here we are able to set up a group that is able to shift the conversation from using technology as a tool to using technology as a platform on which to deliver development. So maybe that is something that we can have as an outcome here. And then I just wondered, Martin, maybe you can help me. This one of the resolutions here on page 9 talks about strengthen, that is one of the resolutions of the G20, strengthen engagement with the civil society, academia, and the business community. And I'm wondering, how do we make this practical? Do we want to leave it to the G20? Or are we going to find ways in which we can deliberately develop areas of strengthening whatever engagement with the business community? That's it.
We are going to move on. Sorry, there might be some other comments that was stimulated by the three very insightful comments, and thank you for raising your hand as well. But I think we have to move on And I remember, we have tomorrow and the day after to discuss or deepen a dialogue. So please make a note for yourself so that you have opportunity to speak up tomorrow or the day after. Now, let's move on to the adoption of the Tokyo Declaration. And before doing so, though, let's go. You have some.
Okay, so we like to adopt the Tokyo Declaration from the Tokyo Democracy Forum. You can find the draft on the page 5 and page 6. And we are going to read, we'll be inviting some people to read the draft in front of you, or together with you. But let me add one thing. Actually, the structure of this declaration follows the session structure of today, like starting from the IPO session on the civic space initiative to the life against children. So some of you might feel that you like to add something more so that your interests or your expertise can be included in this declaration. So we are ready to publish an addendum to this declaration. And we like to call for your inputs or suggestions within the next 2 to 3 weeks. And you can send us your comments, suggestions, anything to us. And we will announce the space for you to send your inputs. But please feel free to do so that this Tokyo Declaration will become more comprehensive one. So, having said that, Azumi-san?
Okay. So having said that, I think with that note, I think if you're okay with it, we'd like to move to the adoption of the declaration. So for that, I would like to invite Elle and to come up stage here. And then, no. You're not done yet. Actually, we need to read one by one each respective part on the second page. So the first page, which is page 5 in your pack, is going to be read aloud by Elle and Jitram. And then the following page will be read by each of the 6 reps from each session.
Thank you, Katsuji, and good afternoon, everyone. First, I would like to introduce myself. I am Sotiri from the Cooperation Committee for Cambodia. And now I am Shiram here before you allow the first page of our declaration. Tokyo Declaration on Peace, Human Rights, and Democratic Governance towards improvement of civic space for the SDG 16+. Adopted at Tokyo Democracy Forum, TDF, as part of the G20 Summit in Tokyo, Japan on 21st April 2019. The participants of the Tokyo Democracy Forum, which were held on the first day of the 2019 G20 Summit, 1. Recalling the Busan Declaration on Peaceful, Just, and Inclusive Societies in Asia and beyond on 24 January 2018, and the Ulaanbaatar Declaration on Peaceful, Just, and Inclusive Society in Asia and beyond, SDG 16+, on 28 February 2019. 2. Welcoming the participation of more than 200 civil society members from across the world, including the countries and areas in the group of 20, G20. 3. Expressing our deep appreciation to the organizers of the Tokyo Democracy Forum, namely the Permanent Secretariat of the Community of Democracy, PSCD, Asia Democracy Network, ADN, and Asia Development Alliance, ADA, and the supporters of the Tokyo Democracy Forum, namely the government of Japan, Japan International Cooperation Agency, JICA, and Frederick Ebert Foundation, FES. 4. Reaffirming the importance and gravity of the UN General Assembly document A70L.1, Transforming Our World, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which outlines 17 goals and 169 targets to stimulate actions until 2030 in areas of critical importance for humanity and the planet.
Thank you, Soteri. This is Ditram Lama, representing here from Asia Development Alliance, and also representing here from NGO Federation of Nepal. I am going to present best point of adoption of Tokyo-based forum area. Number 5, reaffirming that the principle of the UN 2030 agenda are embedded in such fashion as we are determined to foster peaceful, just and inclusive society which are free from fear and violence. We embedded a world of universal respect for human rights and human dignity, the rule of law, justice, equality, and non-discrimination. Sustainable development cannot be realized without peace and security, and peace and security will be at risk without sustainable development, and no one will be left behind. Number 6, concern about continuing conflict and humanitarian crisis, the dreadful violation of human rights, erosion of rule of law, denial of access to justice, and deteriorating democratic governance. Number 7, concern about increasing restriction on civic space and human rights, including freedom of speech, expression, association, and assembly, especially in Asia. Increasing financial and security constraints on civil society organizations, attack on human rights defenders, gender inequality and discrimination against LGBTQI people, corruption and undermining of democratic governance, risk associated with technological disruption, especially in the field of artificial intelligence and bioengineering, which may negatively impact on civil society, and the abuse, exploitation, trafficking, torture, and all forms of violence against children. Declare that SDG is the enabler and accelerator of all SDG goals. I am coming to work with all governments, especially those in the G20 and other official G20 engagement groups, to ensure the full achievement of SDG 16 and its 12 target to promote peaceful and inclusive society for sustainable development, provide access to justice for all, and build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels. Number 9, submit the following 8 recommendations as a part of 2019 G20 committee to the 2019 G20 Osaka Summit scheduled on 28 to 29 June 2019. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Sotiari and Dita, for reading out the preamble. So now let me move into the substantive recommendations. So I start. Okay.
I propose that today we're going to nearly about 130 people died by bomb in Sri Lanka. Maybe number 6 we can add that with special attention to the bomb blast which took place today in Sri Lanka, killing more than 130 people. So, because this is adopted by today, so we got one sentence so that we can memorize it.
Thank you very much for an important suggestion. Thank you very much.
I think maybe we can talk, we can include, suggest a particular precise language to be included so that that can be included in the adoption today.
Thank you. So let us move into recommendations. So recommendation A, G20 governments must consider and implement all previous G20 recommendations within a specific time frame.
The G20 governments must do all within their power to make SDG 16 a permanent, global, and cost-cutting priority goal at the UN High-Level Forum on Sustainable Development, and review it on an annual basis as is done with SDG 17.
Regarding civic space in Asia, G20 government must recognize that CSOs are indispensable and independent actors in their own right. There are diversity of voices from civil society enriches policy making, and that legal and policy framework regulating CSOs must enable diverse and free operation rather than restrict or control them. Relevant governments must also create meaningful partnerships with civil society, providing financial and other support as required, and respect international agreed human rights standards, including freedom of association, assembly, expression, and the right to operate independently without government interference.
Regarding gender and sexuality, G20 governments must develop and implement comprehensive plans to achieve SDG 5, which will contribute to the fulfillment of SDG 16. In doing this, they must ensure women are engaged in all aspects of peace processes and support them to lead, participate, and benefit equally from governance systems. Introduce and implement laws to eliminate discrimination and gender-based violence against women and LGBTQI people, including sexual and other violence in the context of conflict. Provide public services that fully meet women's and LGBTQI people's needs, and ensure gender-responsive reform of justice and security institutions.
Regarding corruption in democratic governance, G20 government must recognize that a social system and practice related to transparency and civic participation combined with inequality is what causes corruption. They must establish and strengthen adequate legislative, administrative, and social measures to increase accountability and integrity. Engaging stakeholders, including civil society and vulnerable people who are suffering due to corruption. As a cross-border issue, global collaboration is a key, and the G20 governments must work across borders to combat corruption.
Regarding financial and security constraints in CSO, G20 governments must ensure that financial laws and practices facilitate the establishment and operation of CSOs, evaluate the legal and regulatory environment to enable CSOs and human rights defenders to freely carry out their legitimate work, and collaborate with global mechanisms, including the Financial Action Task Force and the Global Partnership for Financial Inclusion, and with civil society partners to study and mitigate the negative impact of bank de-risking in non-profit organizations.
Regarding science, technology, and civil society, G20 governments must establish an intergovernmental process with universal and inclusive membership to regulate the development of science and technology, especially artificial intelligence. They must also engage with stakeholders at the national level to design transitional policy in this context, which includes retraining workers, upgrading educational curricula, promoting the increased participation of women and girls in STEAM. STEAM is science, technology, engineering, art, and mathematics courses and professions, and supporting new forms of digital ownership such as platform cooperatives, which provide a safe, accountable space for users and workers to provide and use data to collectively share the benefits of digitalization.
Regarding violence against children, G20 governments must recognize that all forms of violence against children are unacceptable, and that this is clearly set out in the 2030 Agenda as a fundamental principle of peaceful, just, and democratic society in SDG 16, as well as Article 19 of the Convention of the Rights of the Child, which provides that states should take all appropriate legislative, administrative, and social and educational measures to protect the child. G20 governments must thus show leadership in addressing common challenges through focused actions to put an end to violence against children, easy by prohibiting corporal punishment in all settings and promoting a children's rights-based approach to child crazy caregiving. Thank you.
Atsuko spoke about, which is we can still add a few notes as addendum to this Tokyo Declaration. Can we now say that, can we say yes to the proposal that we adopt the Tokyo Declaration?
Yeah.
Is it about some addition to this, or?
Yeah.
If it's about the addition to or any modification to the declaration, could you please, as we just opened up the 2-3 week period, to suggest, propose additional language amendments to the Tokyo Declaration? Is that acceptable? Yeah.
I think if we can request the plenary to share whatsoever their concerns and additions, and then note it down and then finally update and then circulate among all and get approvals. That would be helpful. I just wanted to add the concerns about the ODA. The G20 governments should make sure their commitment on the official development assistance in order to have implementation of the SDGs. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so with that, I think there is no opposition to the idea. So please again, give the secretariat the precise language about the amendments. And so with that, please, if you can again adopt the Tokyo Declaration, please show your approval by giving us a big hand. Okay, thank you very much. So the Tokyo Declaration has been adopted. Thank you.
Kaori Kuroda, Chair the Japan Civil Society Network of SDGs, to make a presentation from Japanese Civil Society. So, Kaori, the floor is yours.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm sure many of you must be tired, and after traveling long distance. And thank you very much for giving me a few minutes to make some remarks. So I'm Kaori Kuroda. I'm the president of Japan Civil Society Network on SDGs and a board member of JANIC. So I'd like to say a few words. And it is truly significant that Democracy Forum was finally held in Tokyo as part of C20 after Busan and Ulaanbaatar. I'm so glad that the Tokyo Democracy Declaration was adopted, although it's still open for some comments and modification. And I'd like to extend my heartfelt thanks to co-organizers, Asia Development Alliance and Asia Democratic Network, and so on, and all members of C20 for materializing this forum. My special thanks go to all the participants today from both G20 countries and non-G20 countries for actively participating in this forum. My special thanks also go to the members of 2019 G20 Summit Civil Society Platform, staff and volunteers and secretariat for their tremendous and hard work to materialize this forum. and the C20, I'm sorry that your decent work wasn't sufficiently guaranteed for the preparations. Okay, so let me touch briefly on human rights and the SDGs. I'd like to emphasize that the human rights are fundamental to achieve the SDGs. I believe you as civil society members are fully aware of this. But these days, SDGs have become prevailing in Japan, like in many other countries, at rather rapid pace. And I'm afraid that the key concepts are often left behind. SDGs are popular among the private sector, community, and next one, please. And Professor John Ruggie, who was the core figure of developing the UN guiding principles on business and human rights, shared his concern about the human rights and the SDGs at the Forum on Business and Human Rights in Geneva in 2016. So he says, the first General Assembly resolution adopting the SDGs in its operative part makes only a passing reference to relevant standards and agreements that address corporate accountability for human rights and agreement on human rights and including the guiding principles. This may be misread by some to imply that these standards matter less than getting business to engage in the SDGs. And the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, or OHCHR for short, publicized the chart which links each goal with related human rights. For Japanese-speaking persons, next please, Asia Pacific Human Rights Information Center, or Human Rights Osaka, translated this linkage table into Japanese, and the co-chair of the C20, Asuko Miwa, is the director of this organization. Next, please. The Danish Institute for Human Rights looked at the 169 targets and analyzed the more than 90% of the SDGs targets are linked to international human rights and labor standards. Thus, the 2030 agenda and SDGs can contribute substantially to the realization of human rights. And next, please. Now, we share that the human rights is integral part to the 70 goals, to achieve the 70 goals and 169 targets. And let's turn our eyes on the situation of Japan in light of the means of implementation and indicators of the goal 16. So 16.8.1 says, this is the indicator, existence of independent human rights institution in compliance with the Paris principles. However, the National Human Rights Institution doesn't exist in Japan. As many of you know, national human rights institutions are state bodies with a constitutional and or legislative mandate to protect and promote human rights. As far as human rights protection, the role of national human rights institutes include helping to identify and investigate human rights abuses, to bring those responsible for human rights violations to justice, and provide a remedy and address for victims. In Japan, human rights activists, many of you might be involved in this, civil society organizations and the Japan Bar Associations and so on, had long been longing and struggling for the creation of National Human Rights Institution in vain, but the landscape has been changing a bit. And interestingly, in recent years, quite a few corporations also want the National Human Rights Institution to seek leveling a playing field. But it may be possible to create a collective action to make this happen in the not so distant future. And speaking of the remedy, a national contact point for responsible business conduct promoting OECD guidelines for multinational enterprises needs to be strengthened in Japan as well. And tomorrow we are going to have a keynote address through a video message by Mr. Dante Pesh, the chair of the UN Working Group on Business and Human Rights. I hope we can discuss remedy in the session tomorrow. So finally, it was a significant experience for Japanese civil society to organize such an international forum with the important themes, PhD, right? And peace and human rights, peace, human rights, and democracy, with so many CSOs of Japan and the rest of the world, and participants from other sectors. In earlier session, I'm concerned about the limited role of civil society in Japan was shared. However, this forum has empowered local civil society, means the Japanese civil society, and they will lead to our commitments with confidence in working more on those themes in the future with all of you. So thank you very much for your attention.
Now in closing, this closing session of the Tokyo Democracy Forum, we have Ichal and Josna representing ADN and ADA.
So Josna and Ichal, thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Jyotsna and I am representing Asia Development Alliance. It's a privilege to present the closing remark. So it's a privilege to present the closing remark of the Tokyo Democracy Forum in this August gathering, and I pay my deep gratitude to the C20 organizers and the local civil society in Japan for having us. Before anything, I would like to reflect on what happened today, and in the morning I was very impressed by what the KOICA and the JICA, to hear the remarks from KOICA and JICA, where they have recognized the role of civil society, which is very important. And we have been working with KOICA for quite some time in ADA. So it's the recognition of the role of civil society, the multi-stakeholder platform, multi-stakeholder partnership is very important, and which is what is reflected in this gathering. I hope that we continue this in future as well. And I was again very impressed with the speaker just before me, where linking the whole thing with the SDGs, because we have been talking about the shrinking civic spaces and everything, but the civic SDGs are one of the very important medium actually to connect the human rights, democracy and development, and also give a great opportunity for the civil society to work with the government and other platforms. So I have been also hearing that SDGs come from somewhere else. It's not, SDG have been a very, very participatory process. We all got engaged in that. So, it came from us actually, from the bottom, so, it's ours, they are our agenda. They may not be in our language, but maybe in the UN language, but the agenda is ours. So we have to really think about it, and we have to understand this fact. And one thing which I see here in one of those important things, being a regional forum, that our job is to link the national, regional and the global platforms. So what we see at the national level, we have membership, all the national platforms are members in 28 countries. If we see the engagement process at the national level, we really need to strengthen the process because we cannot work at the global level until we have a very, very strong mechanism at the national level that is also engaging with the member states. Because nowadays, and I'm glad that in some of the countries is really working in, especially in countries like Cambodia where the space is shrinking, but still, with SDGs you can actually call the governments and you can, if you do not want to hold them accountable, but at least you get them to speak on from the same platform, which is a very good thing. So we really need to understand the importance of having multi-stakeholder platform and engaging the government at the national level. But we see at the regional level, especially in Asia, it's very strong. We worked with Asia Pacific's forum. Recently we concluded the APFSD, the 7th APFSD in Bangkok, where you see the level of engagement with the government, with private sector and UN, and the civil society is very strong. But again, this is somewhere missing at the global level. So what I would want to emphasize through this platform that, so let's work on, strengthening the linkages at the national level and the global level, and then we can link our, and that will be the day when we, when we link the national and the regional and the global level, and then we can think, okay, we are on the way to not achieving SDGs, but we are on the right path. One of the important, the last but not least, I would want to just emphasize on the role of G20. I was one of those pioneers. I attended, I remember, Mexico G20 forum. Then there was no C20 actually. And it's very nice to see how the G20 and C20 has evolved, the civil society especially, they have evolved over time and it's so systematic. But again, there is no, as we discussed previously, that G20 doesn't have a permanent secretariat. But then how do we take our voices through our forums and through civil society to the G20? And I was also asked a question by one of the participants, how do we make sure that whatever we presented today or in next 2 days, how do we make sure that our voices are heard by the G20, which happens later in Osaka? So that would be really nice, and it would be nice that our declaration or for next 2 days deliberation are extended to the G20. That's all for me, and thank you so much for having me here.
Today is very monumental, very historical. Tokyo Democracy Forum gatherings. We, the civil society across the continents, across the global, we gathering here. We prove it. We able to consolidate ourselves. We are able to convene in conjunction and preparing paper or pack toward the G20. And I think I congratulate all of you for successful to adopt Tokyo declarations. I think this is something good signs. Besides, we knew many countries, many organizations still work in silos. We giving a stand here. We giving a good pointers of view. Of course, we have to accept and then welcome the criticism from our friends, Paul Ukuma, that perhaps this is not only about another commitment, that we repeatedly do it, we repeatedly again, making another ones in the next future. This should not be only become declarations after declarations. We hope Tokyo Declaration can provide efficient and provide guidance for our coming future. I remember at the early beginning, in this months, the Asia Democracy Network also convenes in Malaysia, and we produce communique of this Asia Democracy Network across different sectors of civil society, and then we reaffirm commitment to uphold democracy commitments. Again, another communique. But I guess there's one point need to be highlighted here. Everybody agree, everybody look the importance to go forward together, to address all the issues together, to reach those unreachable, to touch those untouchable, and try to break silence and come together. The challenge is so fast, we cannot do alone. This is time to reaffirm against. We shall connect after this. We should continue communications to build unity. Nothing we can achieve lonely, but together we can do so much. To make these SDGs and declarations works in the current context of democracy, in the global levels, in the regional levels, to the national level, and to the local communities level. That's a very bright and very ambitious aim that we have to go through together, but this is the future of democracy. I wish to thank to the chairs, co-chairs, and Sherpas, steering committee, international advisory committee, coordinators of working groups and digital economic task group, all parties who put their contribution here together. And of course, all participants from around the world who spending your precious time during the Easter and then attending here to share, to exchange your solidarity. But we must not forget those who are unable to come here. Those who are still living in exile, lonely, because they cannot come back to their country. Those who are in the prison. Those who are still disappeared. They cannot celebrate with us, but our thought, our mind should be with them. Thank you so much, and then I hope and congratulate again the organizers and everybody here for Tokyo declarations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kaori, for your important presentation. And thank you very much, Ichal and Josna, for insightful closing remarks. So thank you very much for all of you participating in the discussion today. But before concluding today's session, I'd like to ask you to pay attention to the left-hand side of this room. There are people who are doing the summary of the session. Yokoyama-san and the rest of the people who are working on that, I'm sorry, I don't know all the names. Please, after closing the session, please have a look at that graphic recording. I'm sorry I cannot introduce all of the names, but could you, Yokoyama-san and
Yokoyama, I'm making the graphic recording for Tokyo Democracy Forum. Today we introduced two pro graphic recorders, Daisuke Motozono and Yu Aruga. I'm going to show you the perfect one at the reception. So please make many discussions and many opportunity. So.
Thank you very much for your hard work. Thank you so much. So, we have a long day today, but we have 2 more days. And for the next 2 days, the venue will not be here. So don't come to this place for long. We have a next session for the next 2 days at Toranomon Forum. which is close to Toronto subway station. So, for the next coming 2 days, we look forward to learning more of each session. Also, to exchange more from each of us and to deeply our insights, and also to confirm our commitment once again to a better world. So thank you very much, everyone. And we have a section on the first floor, so let's meet again at the reception. Thank you so much.
Thank you.